Hello and welcome back to our preview show as we look ahead to this weekend's game away at Brentford. This week, I'm delighted to say that we've got Natalie Sawyer, Brentford fan and Talksport presenter, alongside Stephen Chicken from the Huddersfield Examiner, and of course, our head of football operations, Leigh Bromby. How is everyone?
Very well.
Yeah, all good. Cheers.
Thank you.
Excellent. Natalie, we'll start with you. Obviously, this is the first league game, I should say, at the Brentford Community Stadium. How exciting is this, first of all, as a Brentford fan? Obviously, you can't be there, but for the club, it's a massive thing, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It's huge. Talk of moving to a new stadium has been going on for years and years and years at Brentford. And we've been talking about different locations further afield from where we are now located. And the Brentford Community Stadium is just a mile away from Griffin Park. So you can't get much of a closer stadium, really, for a club to be moving to. I have been fortunate to be in that stadium. I was there for our pre-season game against Oxford, which was our first proper game there. And as someone who's obviously only ever known Griffin Park, to walk into that stadium, it is a wow factor. And I think any Brentford fan will walk in there and just be in awe of what they have built there. It is incredible. And yeah, it's exciting. It's really exciting times for Brentford.
Broms, obviously, from a player perspective, a former player perspective, when you've got that first league game at a brand new stadium, does that change anything, whether you're the home team or the away team?
I think so. I think particularly with a club like Brentford, who historically going there as a player myself is a difficult place to play. So it's a big advantage with the changing rooms, which are quite small. The stadium's really, really close, and the atmosphere is fantastic. I always found that was an advantage for clubs similar to Brentford. So it'll be really, really interesting to see that transition into a new stadium, which is fantastic, and it's a great progression for the club commercially. But as a playing side, to see if they can sort of live up to that change, because you know the other clubs will be coming now, and it'll be a great place to go for them as well. And you've seen some teams that have struggled with that. So yeah, it'll be really interesting from a playing point of view. I suppose that is, I must say, the one thing, Leigh, that I think is disappointing leaving Griffin Park is the dressing room for the away team is disgusting. I mean, it's tiny. There's one toilet. I don't think you can even close the door. It's so tight in there. So I'm a little bit disappointed that no doubt at the new stadium, it's going to be a bit luxurious, which is not what we want. Yeah. But I think it is progression for the club, which is fantastic. But yeah, those little things, they do weigh in the advantage of the team that are used to it, and obviously Brentford have used that to their advantage. But yeah, fantastic to see that move for the club, and such exciting times for them as well. The players will be excited, the staff will be excited by it, and obviously the fans as well. It's just a shame, you know, we're in this situation where the fans can't enjoy that moment as well.
And the pitch is a little bit bigger as well, isn't it? I can imagine for Brentford's free-flowing, expansive style of football, that might play into their hands a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you look at what Brentford have done and put something in place which is taken a lot of people to look at. I think it's really interesting, and what they have achieved over the last few years has been planned. It's not by coincidence, and they've done it progressively, which is fantastic. And with some dynamic people around that club, which, you know, for us looking at the club, you want to take those ideas, you want to look at those ideas. And I think that's one thing that, looking at Brentford now moving to this stadium, it does feel really exciting. They're playing a different style of football, which the pitch should suit them. Playing at that type of stadium should suit the club and where they are. So yeah, I think they've made strides from when I played at Griffin Park a long time ago, and it's great to see. It's great to see what they've done.
Yeah,
you mentioned that backroom setup they've got there, Leigh, and wanted to take those ideas. And obviously, Mark Devlin's now at Huddersfield Town as chief exec. He's former Brentford. Has he brought anything of sort of the Brentford way of doing things to Huddersfield at all? Do you know?
I think Mark's had since he's come quite a big job with COVID hitting straight away. But yeah, I've asked a lot of questions, and we when we changed the academy, and we weren't quite set up for a B team model. We changed similar to Brentford after Brentford, but we still run from 16s down. We've done a lot of co-learning with the guys at Brentford. We've played them a lot. We've spent time there asking them questions and seeing that evolve in that direction. And I think we're a little bit different. But very similar. And yeah, Mark, we've asked a lot of questions of and how Brentford done it, because there is that interest around Brentford and that model. And what they've done is they've made a niche for themselves, and they've been good at maybe taking some criticism, Natalie, before with the academy, similar to us. But that's all gone because of what they've done, and they've got a real positivity about the club at the moment. But yeah, to touch on your point, Steve, I think Mark will put those things in place. He's obviously come from that experience, and it's a good fit for us with Mark coming with those experiences and to be able to sort of share those ideas with us as well of what Brentford did put in place through that period.
I think you're right to mention the criticism that we had when we disbanded our academy. We'd spent a fortune on an academy, and yet Matthew Benham decided it wasn't the right way to go about things, because we were losing players at a very young, early age that we weren't really getting anything for, and the B team seemed to be the right avenue to go down. Initially, it did get a lot of criticism, and I myself remember thinking, this is crazy. There's a lot of young kids who are going to miss out, but now it's paying dividends for us, and we are now seeing B team players make it into our first team, and it seems to be working out really well, especially as the B team are playing against teams not just from England but from Europe, and they're benefiting from that experience of playing proper 90-minute matches that are high intensity.
Yeah, I think it's the right fit for the club, and it's a brave decision, but it seems to be the right one at the minute.
Yeah, I was going to say, Natalie, give us an insight into the B team at Brentford and how players have progressed into the first team, because then we can put like a direct, or supporters here for Huddersfield Town can put a direct comparison across to how it's been helping us so far as well.
Yeah, so I mean, our B team, as I say, play a variety of different teams across Europe they've played, and it's really so fascinating to see that the teams that they've played, from Spanish teams to German teams, and it is proper competitive games. It's not friendlies as such, because these B team players know that if they perform really well, they will be given an opportunity to play in the first team, and we are now seeing some of those players come through. I forget the number now, but we're certainly getting towards 20 odd players that have come through the B team system that are now regularly starting to appear for Brentford in the first team. So I do think it works out really, really well. Yes, as I say, an academy at first, it felt like that was the right thing to do to keep it, but we got rid of that for the reasons I've already stated. And now I actually think we're probably getting to see more players come through that way than if we'd had an academy, because inevitably, if you do have a good player, they tend to move on to another team, as we've lost players to Manchester City, for example, because we just couldn't compete financially with those sorts of teams. So this B team structure just seems to have the right pathway for players, and we're loving it at Brentford.
Yeah, that was like the same ideology here, wasn't it, Broms?
Yeah, I think it was a brave decision. I think when Dean timed it perfectly, really, when we're promoted to the Premier League. And yeah, it's difficult to compete exactly what, as you put it, Natalie, we're surrounded by Manchester United, Man City, Everton, Liverpool, all these players that were in our academy that then leave because of those clubs. And you can't blame the kids for wanting to do that, and the parents, because of the facilities and the opportunities at those clubs are fantastic. So yeah, it just didn't work for us. I feel our decision was made because we wanted to be good at these age groups, and trying to be good across a full academy is really difficult, and the finances needed is huge. So yeah, we've looked at a similar way. We've been and played in Europe. We've followed. We're playing a tournament with Brentford So the Glasgow Cup, which has been really successful, and as you just said, the intensity and the level of the games, we probably couldn't get in the Category 2. So yeah, there's been some positives for ourselves as well.
Yeah, and Steve, obviously from outside coverage, when you see the B team playing, for example, most recently against Liverpool, drawing 1-1, I think it was last Sunday, and there was a Liverpool team full of international stars there as well, like James Milner, Minamino, Origi, Shaqiri, to name a few. For you reporting on that, it really adds credence, doesn't it, to the schedule for the B team, and really shows the fans that actually these players in the future could come out and play for Huddersfield Town.
Yeah, it was a young Town lineup as well, so there's definite positives there. I mean, obviously, you can't put too much weight in the result on those things, which I think Danny Schofield went out of his way to say after the game, but it's still great experience for those players to go up against players like that who are maybe on the fringes of other teams or need minutes at sort of Premier League teams, and also for the B team. I mean, we saw the video that you put out of the team in training the other day, and for the players who are on the B team who are maybe sort of the best view in the academy to be playing regularly alongside the senior players, you can understand how that aids the pathway into the first team, because it means that once they step up, they're already familiar with, Romany Critchlow's been playing with Christopher Schindler all summer, or been playing with him throughout training all week, and it means that it's not a brand new face there who you watch that Tottenham documentary, and Tanganga had been sequestered away in a separate academy and never encountered the first teamers before. And it just makes that transition a little bit more difficult. So I totally understand the logic behind it. And I mean, hopefully we'll start seeing the dividends of it. There's been a few players obviously who've broken through into the first team already. A few from the old academy system like Lewis O'Brien, Ryan Schofield not too far away as well once he gets back from injury. But we've also seen players from the new setup starting to come through as well, like like Kean Harrott, for instance, and D'Amico Dehaney and Jaden Brown have all come into the side. Matty Daly, who I know Carlos Corberan is a big fan of, he's saying last week what a player he is and how excited he is to have him back in the side. So yeah, I know it's not for everyone, and a lot of people still need to be won over, but I think the early indications are good.
And Broms, obviously you're in and around those B team players daily. Have any of those guys, the likes of Romany, Aaron Rowe, come to you and said, like, I really enjoy what you've set up here, what we're doing?
Generally not, though. I think no. Yeah, no, we've got some good relationship with the lads. They're all, but I think they're not what would I say, forward with saying compliments to us. I think you know what I think. Not being biased, I think it's a great opportunity for the young players with the club. There's a real belief at Huddersfield Town in these players, and that's key. Whichever system you've got, and there's a huge belief from Phil. Now, when I was academy manager, Phil sponsored the academy and put his own money in, which was over and above any other sponsor, that allowed us to do loads of things within the academy. So he's aware of that sort of setup. He was aware of the players. When he's come in, obviously as the owner of the club, he likes nothing more than, like, Ben Jackson made his debut against Norwich. Now it was fantastic. Do you know what I mean? That he's been a product of this. And Steve, you mentioned a few of the other players, but I think when you've got an owner and a club that really believe in this way, and the players feel it, so I think the players now can sense that, and it was the same at Brentford. The young players will be able to sense that the clubs actually want them to progress. So we've had a lot of players on the bench. We've had a lot of players that have been involved already this season, so they can see it and they can sense it, and it's got a good atmosphere around the place, and particularly going and playing like a Liverpool team that involves that type of player and that level of player at Anfield, then it makes it real for the players.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll switch the conversation onto Brentford. Obviously, Natalie, they lost their opening game against Birmingham City, but from what I saw and from what people have said, it was a good performance. And obviously to go and beat Southampton, it doesn't really look like there's been much of a hangover almost from the playoff final defeat, which you can get sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's probably because they haven't had time to really, digest it, I suppose, because this season's come around so quick. So you kind of have to move on. And in a way, I hope that will benefit us because, I know as a Brentford fan, I've kind of got over last season because I'm already now focusing on this season. I've had no time to think about it. I've had that moment already of, I can't believe we didn't go up. But now it's all about, well, focus on this season. Yes, there are players that are still, we don't know what's happening with their futures, but, we sort of trust what our recruitment team do. We sort of trust the manager or head coach, I should say. So I don't know, there is still an optimism about Brentford. Having said that, we were very optimistic last year. It didn't quite work out. So maybe I have to temper it a little bit.
Style-wise as well, I can imagine it will be very similar to what we saw last season.
Definitely. It won't change. And again, that's what the B team do as well. They play a very similar system to what we would play because that's what, well, I say that's what we enjoy. They're not catering for us fans, but that is what Brentford want to play. That's how they want to play. They want to play that expansive, attractive football. I remember hearing Matthew Benham, our owner, talking about he would rather lose 5-3 than 1-0 because at least it's exciting. At least we've given the fans something to cheer about, if you like. So yeah, our system won't change. We will still play the same way, and hopefully that means that all the plaudits we kind of received last season, we will continue to get this season.
And with that in mind, Steve, it could be a really interesting encounter, couldn't it? Two teams who want to play football, high intensity pressing.
Yeah, very much the opposite approach to what Huddersfield Town took against Brentford last season, and they got 4 points. So you can't knock it, to be honest. That great win away at Griffin Park in November, and then a really good 0-0 at home as well. But it's at this stage of the season, Carlos Corberán needs his side to be getting up to speed in attack as well as defence. We were chatting a bit before the call, and we were saying, the defensive work, the defensive side of the game is getting there. There's a lot more work to do in attack, though, and the only way they're going to do that is through practice, and the only way they're going to do it is by sticking to the guns, even against bigger teams like Brentford, even away from home, and just going for it. That's the whole point of having brought in Carlos Corberán in the first place. So it's a tricky game, and you mentioned sort of the big pitch that they've got now at the new stadium, perhaps playing into that expansive style of football that Brentford like to play. But I think it plays into Town's front line as it stands at the moment, because you've got some really quick players there like Josh Koroma, Adama Diakabi, Isaac Mbenza if he plays as well, who could get in behind the Brentford defence. And the Norwich game was very end-to-end. I would say it was, both teams sort of playing a high line and trying to get at each other and try to catch each other on the counter. And I expect we're going to see more of the same against Brentford.
I'm fascinated to see Huddersfield this season because, obviously when the Cowley brothers were told that they weren't going to have a future at the club, it obviously raised a few eyebrows because they'd only just sort of joined. And then obviously when it all emerged who was coming in, someone that had worked with Marcelo Bielsa, you naturally knew that this was going to take a whole different direction at Huddersfield. So I'm fascinated to see this game tomorrow. And we don't enjoy playing against teams that frustrate us, that don't like to play open football. So those 4 points that you got off us last season, I'm not surprised, because we prefer to come up against teams that do like to play, because it is more open then, isn't it? We find it far too frustrating to break down teams. We have the ability to, but if you do stick, everybody behind the ball, then that becomes a very difficult 90 minutes for us. So tomorrow, I'm hoping it will be really, really exciting football.
the opposite was true of Huddersfield as well. They struggled in games where they actually had a lot of the ball and were on the front foot. And it was the games against the more attacking teams where they actually did well, because it was about just containing it and trying to catch them on the break. And obviously they're trying to move away from that now, because when you're in a relegation fight, that is maybe a good quality to have. But if you've got aspirations to move higher up the table, you need to be in this division. You need to be able to take it to the opposition, I think. So, I mean, it's not there yet. And as I say, there's a long way to go. And we looked on our podcast recently at some of the stats in attack, and we're not seeing those needles moving yet. But obviously the club and Carlos Corberán, I'll be hoping that they'll see an improvement on that over the next few games and going into the season.
Obviously, it's been a shorter pre-season when you're going from being a space marking team to 1v1 all over the pitch. The defensive work is the key, first of all. We saw the fruits of that in elements against Norwich City. How have you assessed the performances, Broms? I'm really interested to hear, because obviously you were instrumental in bringing Carlos to the club with this new style of play in mind.
Yeah, I think if you look at Natalie, you mentioned about the surprise with Danny and Nicky, and probably to clear some of that up for people as well, was we've got an owner who's really brave, and you spoke about your owner at Brentford who wants to see when he comes to a game, and yes, I've heard those spoke by both owners, Dean and Phil, they'd rather lose in a certain way. And the way we were playing wasn't aligned with the two owners and their vision. So obviously something had to change. The way we're going is towards that high press. But the difficult with it was that we know we're not giving Carlos that time because of the COVID and the delay and things like that. And Steve, your point as well about seeing some little bits fall into play. That's the first time that 11 have played together ever against Norwich. So in terms of what I'm seeing, Adam, on the training pitch every day is absolutely fantastic. And my passion is coaching. Yeah. And obviously playing and then into coaching. And what I am seeing is fantastic. So the process is there. The day-to-day work is there. The alignment is there with the owners and the club and what the supporters want to see. It's just, we all know it's going to take time. And in football, that is one thing that you don't get. But we're mindful at the club of the expectations. So what I've seen so far, Adam, is positive. And it's a step forward each week. So for Rochdale, then to Norwich was a big step forward within a week. And I'm hoping there's another step forward against Brentford. What are my expectations of the game? It's more on performance and those things you said, Steve, about the attacking bits. Can we piece some of them together? Because I personally thought it came down to some individual errors when we're in really good moments. So we progressed the ball. We'd done a lot of some really good things in the game, and then there was individual errors in those attacking moments, and that's when you start talking about the club have to provide the head coach with the quality of player to do the things he wants to do. So is it Carlos's, we believe in this style, we know it's a fantastic style, it's very similar to Leeds with Carlos's personality on there. Now, my job and the club's job is to make sure we provide him with the players that can actually execute that. So when we're in the attacking moments, that we have the players that have got the skill set to be able to deal with the ball in those moments at such a high tempo. We have to provide the players that can press and play front foot, which is something Brentford have done really well with their recruitment. You talked about that trust of the recruitment, and that's been questioned at Huddersfield Town, let's be honest. I feel a couple of signings have been positive so far, but yeah, as expectations, as where we are, I think, yeah, we need some time. But we're getting judged. We'll get judged on Saturday, both teams, from the result. But yeah, there's a balance in football where we understand we're moving in a new direction. We understand this time needed, but also we've got to get results. and that's why we all love football. It's not easy.
Before we completely move on to like the recruitment side of things, obviously Brentford had a game in the week, like we said, against Southampton. We've had a full week's training.
Yeah.
What kind of impact could that have? Obviously, we need that extra time on the grass, but also from a match fitness side of things, how could that negatively, I suppose, affect Brentford?
Yeah, I was delighted when I went home on Wednesday and saw Brentford were playing. So, will it have a huge effect? I'm not sure. Will it, any slight advantage that you can gain at elite sport, you've got to take. And that's why we put all the things in place with the sports science and the recovery and the nutrition. And having a game on a Wednesday compared to a Tuesday to then play Saturday is difficult. Were they away?
We were away. We were at Southampton.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there were 6 changes we made. So, obviously those players that didn't play on Wednesday will come in to that first team you'd fully expect. So, yeah, I can see where you're coming from, and I can see how you're trying to like stoke the fire there. But we'll be prepared. Don't you worry. It's still early days. We'll be all right.
I think it is one of them genuinely where you're looking at the game and excited.
Yeah.
Which we've all mentioned and that's something I think it's great for the supporters and ourselves that we're going into a game where we're thinking, right, we're really looking forward to this game, not just the outcome. So.
Yeah, and we touched upon recruitment. We'll focus on that point now. Natalie, obviously, last year Brentford had the BMW front line: Benrahma, Watkins, and Boehmite. Obviously, that season that's split up a little bit now. Obviously, Ollie Watkins has gone to Aston Villa. Benrahma has been heavily linked away and didn't feature in the first 2 games. Mm. How difficult do you think it is for clubs at this moment in time when you're trying to plan for the future? You've got players where you're not sure where they're going to be, especially for a side like Brentford, whose front 3, let's be honest, was the catalyst for last year.
Do you know what? It's horrid. I don't want to say it was all about the BMW, because actually defensively we massively improved at Brentford as well. Bringing in Pontus Jansson, Ethan Pinnock as well. They gelled. I mean, they didn't play together for quite a while at the start, but once they played together and they started to click, it was fantastic. So, but when it comes to this transfer window, as you say, it's so frustrating. I mean, I don't even know what player's name to get on my shirt, for example, because you don't know if they're still going to be there. So, it is. I could only imagine the headache it causes. Your head coach, your sporting directors, your football directors. Because what you want to start a season surely with the squad that is going to take you through to at least January. Like, that's how I would like to see it, but that isn't the case. So yeah, it's frustrating, and in a way, every day you're logging on to social media, you're logging on to see which team's now coming in for so and so, and I'm sure in a way that it may be true of Huddersfield as well. There may be the odd player here and there that is going to be moving on, that at this moment in time you don't actually know what's going to be happening with them, and it's unsettling. I can well imagine it's unsettling for the team, it's unsettling for the managers, the head coaches, because they don't know essentially who they're going to have until that deadline closes. So yeah, I find it very, very frustrating. I wish it was all done and dusted now, so we knew who we've got going forward with.
It must be really difficult, Broms.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you look back over trends and you look at teams and building teams, that the successful ones are usually together over a period of time. So, for example, when David Wagner came here, he did all his signings in April. He had his team for pre-season. He took them away. He knew his starting 11, who his signings were, who was out of the building. That was done before. And what we've done with COVID and over these times is every club's in a similar position. It'd be really interesting to look back on this season to see if someone could be successful with all those changes, because it doesn't usually happen. There might be one-offs. There could be, so I could be proven totally wrong here, but what I usually see is that trend of the teams that have got their team and it's settled, and you're starting 11, which Brentford had last year, with no real big changes, is when you get success. And that is one of ours. When I review and look back, and you have to do that to try and learn and move forward, we've not really had that. You look at, could you name the Huddersfield Town team regular, where you're like, oh yeah, I know that's the starting 11. And it's something that'll be really interesting, because clubs are getting challenged and tested and through this period, and you could lose a player in 2 days or 3 weeks, 4 weeks time, or they could be still here, and you can't, the targets you're looking for, you can only bring in if these players leave. So yeah, really interesting, really dynamic. I think the feedback I'm getting is people are similar, and it's something that we don't want to be as a club. It's becoming it could be reactive, and that's when you could make mistakes as a club. So it's going to be an interesting season, because no one has been through this before. And no one can say, oh yeah, I've experienced it, this is what's going to happen. Or so yeah, I'm fascinated, and it's quite exciting to see who comes up with the answers, really.
Leigh, can I ask you, without obviously going into massive details, as I'm sure you don't want to, but financially, how difficult do you think this whole period has been for clubs, and with respect to the transfer window?
I think it's made clubs nervous. I think, and rightly so, I think football, alongside any other business, has been affected. And there's been probably some reality come into football, and maybe players with the contracts that are being offered, the amount of players and the size of squads. And I feel a club like Brentford and ourselves, and I keep saying this, I think we're ahead of the curve because of the B teams and the things we've done with the academies and the players. So, for example, Ben Jackson playing for us against Norwich, and I thought we were just edged it without that real quality. We'd have usually just played a player that was on a big contract, or we'd have signed for money, but we're not taking those players now. So it's also giving the younger ones opportunities. But I do feel the clubs that are best equipped and have concentrated, are really focused on the youth teams, will be ahead of the curve, because they'll be needed. So yeah, I think football has been affected. I think contracts will be different, and I think clubs will be more cautious moving forward, 100%.
We've said that, or Natalie said that Brentford fans are really pleased and have a lot of trust in their recruitment team.
Yeah.
Their recruitment model's really interesting, isn't it, Leigh? Yeah,
it's fascinating, and that's probably the most questions I asked Mark Devlin about. So what did they do? What were they doing? And obviously then when you look into it with the owner and his background and things like that, it is fascinating with the club in Denmark. And it's really, really interesting model. And let's be honest, you're at one spectrum where I think you've done fantastic. You've actually retained value in the players, which is another strategy as well, within this system that you're working in. And we've been criticised heavily. We've had the success with the promotion, and we've been criticised for the transfers and the players. There's no hiding behind that. I can't really comment on it because I wasn't part of it. I wasn't involved in it. I was within the academy. And some of the players, every club's going to make mistakes on signings. But yeah, there's no hiding behind some of them have failed. I mean, you can speak probably on it as well, Steve, and the thoughts of the supporters, but I don't think anyone's here like hiding behind those facts or trying to make excuses at all.
No, that's never the impression I've got, to be fair. I think the club have always been willing to front up to mistakes that they've made. And, if there's, particularly when it comes to performance on the pitch, there's a level of fair criticism, I think. And, sometimes fans go overboard. Sometimes we in the media go overboard as well. But I found that as long as people are being, the club will respond to fair criticism, and you're not daft yourselves. I know from speaking to you, you Leigh, and other people as well. Half the time, if you come up with a criticism, everyone at the club knows it full well, as you'd expect them to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's. I would say that everyone is aware of the issues at the club, but you can't solve them, as you've alluded to. You can't solve them overnight. And when we talk about, the attacking play isn't there yet at the start of the season, the reason that we've talked about that on the podcast is because we want to see where that sort of baseline is now and see whether it lifts off from there. And all the signs are that it will do. I mean, that we've had new signings that haven't even come into the team yet. Naby Sarr is still in quarantine at time of recording. He's not going to be able to play until the Forest game, and he could make a massive difference. There's other players who are sort of in the offing as well, who could make a huge difference to the way the side plays. So it's difficult in the media because we're sort of, there's that impetus. We've got deadlines, we've got to have opinions, and you've got to put forward your opinion sort of on a week-to-week basis, and sometimes the nuance gets lost in that a little bit. But all we can do is judge Huddersfield Town on where they are now and try and look at, well, what direction are they moving in? Are they moving in the right direction? And as you say, from those first two games, there's positive signs there, and hopefully that'll continue against Brentford.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because the beliefs, or one of my big beliefs, is obviously the coaching side, and that's had a big change. And you'll see, we will 100% get to see those players given an opportunity this year. Some of the players that have been criticised and some of the signings, and we might be able to see if that work and the training and the work on the training ground that they're getting now, if that actually helps. Because there'll be some of the players that, were involved last year and maybe didn't have a future at the club will get opportunities this season. So it will be interesting to see how they progress.
In the week leading up to this game, there's been a positive testing from a player in the B team, I believe. Yeah. So all the players who he's been in contact with, the coaching staff have had to self-isolate. There was only 5 players on the bench against Southampton in the week.
Yeah.
From a fan's perspective, it's bigger than just football, isn't it? Like it's a worrying scenario still that we have in this country. Everyone wants the football to continue, but there's bigger things.
Oh, absolutely. And I think at times we've all been a bit blasé, haven't we, of late? I mean, there's that feeling of trying to get back to normality, but realising that actually there is still COVID around. It hasn't gone away. And, as Leigh's just said, it's not going to go away anytime soon. So, of course, it's worrying. And when you see a player has already had a positive test, which we had last season as well. I remember Brian, I think it was Brian Mbeumo, I think he tested positive. It is worrying, but thankfully he came through that, and hopefully this B team player and those around him won't be long-term affected by it. But yes, it certainly brings you back down to earth, doesn't it? When we're all enjoying the football season coming back, when you see that there are positive tests still, it does make you think, wow, yeah, this is still real and something we still all have to think about.
Yeah.
Leigh, there was one more thing I wanted to pick up on in terms of recruitment. You said, obviously, we were having a new strategy this season. I wanted to pick your brains about Pippa. Obviously, he's signed from Espanyol. Just talk to us how you found him, how you alerted him. Obviously, don't give all your trade secrets away.
Oh, go on. You've all been talking about the Brentford model. Let's hear about the Huddersfield one.
Yeah, I think part of the change as well, that before previous regime, there was a reluctance to maybe sign international players. But that's where we'd had so much success as a club with David Wagner, and David brought a new dynamic to our recruitment because of his contacts. One big thing I'd say as well is players are more intelligent, not away from football, than what we give them credit for, because as you said, Natalie, they've seen the change. They've seen the connection with Bielsa. One of the reasons why Carlos was so attractive was for those reasons. So part of the strategy was putting a head coach in place that players want to play for and are really interested by what we're trying to do and what we're trying to put in place. So I can sit in conversations now, which I do with players and agents, and say, this is how we play. I can show them the clips of the player and say, this is how you fit into our DNA in the club. This is our style. This is our head coach. This is his experiences. So what we've tried to do is create a real interest around that. And players, when we've said we're excited about the game, creating that for players that they're excited to want to play in this system and improve. And, you know, we can use live examples because at Leeds, a lot of those players have improved. And you look at Calvin Phillips, who I coached as a 16-year-old, playing for England because he's been coached in such a way and he's grown as a person. So one, that was a big thing for us, and that change was made because players do look at that, agents do look at that, and then also identifying players that can play our system. So Steve, this is the bit with, and Adam, sorry for the question. Pippa trained on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, played Saturday. Now you can comment on this, Steve, but I thought it just looked like he'd always played for Huddersfield Town. And
he was my man of the match. Yeah.
So really just trying to, my job and the recruitment guy's job is to see the game from Carlos's eyes and spend as much time with him as possible to see what characteristics he wants from the players, because I was watching Pippa and I was just thinking he's doing all the things that we want him to do and we see a fullback doing. Now, last year, our fullbacks were not doing those things. So another reason why Carlos was brought in is because I know his coaching methodology and sat with him over hours and hours and hours. Danny Schofield was brought in just prior to him, who's worked with him for 4 years, who was brought in to make sure the B team are playing this way in line with when Carlos comes in. The hardest thing for me was trying to get Carlos over the line. So we'd sort of worked on the academy. This is the way we'd played for years and years and years. Since I sort of took over, bringing Danny in was the next step forward, and then obviously Carlos to align everything. So you mentioned, Natalie, the B team playing the same way as the first team, and that alignment across, and then an alignment with the recruitment. So the job of for me is maybe not identifying the players and finding them, it's making sure the staff here know what that is, because I can visualize it, I can see it, so can Carlos, but making sure the players come in fit that, and that's key. And I've always said all along, Carlos has the final say. We brought Carlos, the recruitment guys, identified him, that comes to me. I organise the financials around it, I do all the negotiation. Carlos has the final say on the player. So that's how that one sort of worked. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's given supporters who are watching this a real insight into how we work in the transfer window. Just finally, to wrap things up, Natalie, how excited are you ahead of this game, not only for the first league game at the Brentford Community Stadium, but just to see Huddersfield Town as well?
Like I said, I am. I'm so intrigued just to see this complete change of direction for Huddersfield. So I'm really, really excited about this game. I'm excited, obviously, because it is our first home league game of this season, our first ever league game at the Brentford Community Stadium. I'm really hoping that Ivan Toney might be able to bag his first goal for Brentford, because I'm just thinking that if he gets that first goal, then hopefully he'll go on this goal-scoring run. And not that I ever want to forget about Ollie Watkins, because we all loved Ollie Watkins, and Brentford fans will always hold him up here because he was just incredible for us. But it would just be nice to sort of say, okay, that was then, this is now, and Ivan Toney is the man to fill that void and to just to take us on to that new level. So yeah, I'm really excited, really intrigued, and I think as I say, just by hearing what you're saying about Huddersfield, if we're at our A game and you're at your A game, it should be a fascinating one.
And Steve Broms, just finally with you two, is it just a case of seeing the next step for you two? Is that what you really want to see from this match?
Yeah, I think that was then, this is now is a really important sort of key phrase for Huddersfield Town as well, and I guess it's about continuing to move in the right direction under Carlos Corberán, starting to see more of the things that he's trying to implement in the squad coming into the fore, and you know, hopefully getting a goal or two would be nice as well, obviously.
Broms, would you echo that?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, part of my job is to look long term and all the things we're trying to do and put in place as a club. But yeah, nervous as we're talking about the game and it gets closer, really nervous about the result and things like that, because yeah, we want to keep making those steps forward. 100%, that's the key.
Fantastic. Natalie, Steve, Broms, thank you all for joining us. I hope you all Huddersfield Town fans watching this enjoyed it. If you want to watch the Brentford game, you have to purchase a match pass for £10 on iFollow HTAFC. Thank you for watching.